This is a story about quiet dignity, the kind that stays when no one is clapping. It's about faith that doesn't rush life, and a man who kept showing up anyway. Larry Scott pushed the mop bucket down the hallway as the clock above the security office clicked over to 5:12 a.m. The building was still asleep. That was how he liked it. No questions. No looks that slid past him. No need to explain why a 64-year-old man was still doing this work with hands that ached before sunrise. The wheels on the bucket squeaked softly. Larry made a mental note to oil them later. Small noises mattered when you spent your life unnoticed. They drew attention. Attention asked questions. And Larry had learned, a long time ago, that questions were heavier than buckets. The floor reflected the fluorescent lights in broken strips. Larry moved carefully, steady, and methodical, the way he always did. One pass forward, one back. Never rushed, never careless. He had been cleaning buildings in Phoenix since before his son learned to ride a bike. Before Tina's hair went gray at the temples. Before Christmas mornings started feeling quieter instead of louder. 32 years in different hallways. Different keys. Same routine. People like to say honest work is enough. Larry believed that, or at least he had tried to. Still, as he bent to wring the mop, a thought slipped in uninvited. What if enough never turns into anything more? He didn't like that thought, so he pushed it away and kept working. At 6:03 a.m., Larry's phone vibrated in his pocket. He froze. Nobody texted him this early. Not Tina, not Harry, not the supervisor who barely remembered his name. Larry wiped his hands on his uniform and checked the screen. No message, just a calendar reminder he didn't remember setting. December 25th, today? He frowned. Of course it was today. Christmas had been coming whether he paid attention or not. It always did. Still, the reminder unsettled him, as if something had already been decided without asking him. Larry slipped the phone back into his pocket and finished the hallway faster than usual. Outside, the desert air was cold enough to sting. Phoenix mornings did that sometimes, caught you off guard when you weren't paying attention. Larry sat in his old sedan for a moment before starting the engine. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and let the silence settle. 64. He hadn't planned to still be here at 64. Not cleaning, not counting hours, not hoping his knees would hold up through another year. But planning had never been his strength. Endurance was. At home, Lola greeted him like he'd been gone for years, tail thumping against the wall with absolute conviction that this moment mattered. Larry smiled despite himself and scratched behind her ears. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "I'm here." Tina was already up, coffee brewing, Christmas lights glowing softly in the corner like they were trying not to bother anyone. "You're quiet today," she said. Larry shrugged out of his jacket. "Just tired." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. As he sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from his mug, Larry felt it again, that subtle pressure in his chest. Not pain, not fear, expectation, which made no sense at all. Nothing new was supposed to happen now. Life had taught him that lesson clearly. People like him didn't get surprises. They got routines, predictable days, gratitude measured in paychecks that arrived on time. And yet, Larry stared at the Christmas lights and thought, with a mix of caution and quiet hope, if nothing else ever comes, I'll still do the next right thing. He didn't know yet that this belief, this stubborn, gentle refusal to quit on life, was exactly what had been noticed, and that by the end of the day, the silence he had lived inside for decades was going to answer back. Larry didn't open presents right away. He never did. Christmas mornings had taught him that joy felt better when it wasn't rushed, when it arrived on its own time, instead of being pulled forward by expectation. Tina understood that. She always had. She set the small gifts aside and let the coffee finish brewing, the quiet between them comfortable in the way only long years could make it. Outside, the sun climbed slowly over Phoenix, light spilling across the backyard fence in pale gold. Lola lay at Larry's feet, head on his slipper, breathing evenly, as if this morning had been promised to her in advance. "You working today?" Tina asked gently. Larry hesitated. Just a half shift, he said. They asked. That part was true. What he didn't say was that they always asked, and that he always said yes. Tina nodded, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than usual. You don't have to, she said quietly. Larry smiled, the same smile he'd worn for decades. I know. Knowing and choosing were different things. He'd learned that early. The campus was emptier than usual. Most people were home with families, wrapping paper, noise. Larry parked in his usual spot and walked in through the side entrance. Keys heavy in his hand like a responsibility he'd never questioned. He liked the building best when it was empty. It told the truth then. No pretending. No hierarchy. Just walls, floors, and time. Larry worked slowly, deliberately. He polished the brass railings until they reflected his face back at him. Older than he felt, calmer than he looked. His hands moved with the confidence of repetition, but his mind wandered. Harry had called the night before. Dad, his son had said, voice careful in that way grown children use when they don't want to sound worried. You ever think about stopping? Larry had laughed. Stopping what? Everything, Harry said. Working so hard. Caring so much. Larry hadn't answered right away, because stopping had always felt like something that happened to people, not something they chose. Near the administrative wing, Larry paused. The office door at the end of the hall stood open. That was unusual. He frowned slightly and pushed the mop bucket aside, footsteps soft against the clean floor. Inside, the lights were on, desk neat, chair tucked in. And on the desk, an envelope. Thick, cream-colored. His name written neatly across the front. Larry Scott. He stood there longer than necessary, heart beating just a little faster than it should have. No one left him envelopes. No one needed to. Larry picked it up carefully, like it might break if he didn't. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead. No signature. Just one sentence. Some paths take longer because they're meant to carry more weight. Larry's throat tightened. He read the sentence again. Then once more, slower this time, letting it settle. It wasn't praise. It wasn't explanation. It was recognition. Something shifted in his chest, small but undeniable. He folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket, unsure why his hands were trembling now. He finished the wing quietly, methodically, but the building felt different around him. Less empty, less silent. As he locked up later that morning, Larry glanced back down the hallway one last time. For years, these halls had known him only as the man who cleaned them. Today, for reasons he couldn't yet understand, they felt like they were waiting for him to notice something in return. Larry stepped out into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. He didn't know who had left the envelope. He didn't know what it meant. But for the first time in a long while, the faith he'd carried quietly through ordinary days felt answered. And whatever was coming next, he sensed it would ask him not just to endure, but to finally be seen. Larry didn't mention the envelope to Tina, not because he wanted to hide it, because saying it out loud felt like tempting something fragile. He kept it folded in his jacket pocket all afternoon, feeling its edges whenever his hand slipped inside. Proof that something had happened, or maybe proof that he'd imagined it. At 64, the line between hope and foolishness felt thinner than it used to. He walked Lola through the neighborhood as the sun dipped lower, houses glowing softly behind drawn curtains. Christmas dinners, laughter, televisions murmuring in living rooms that had decided to rest. Larry nodded at neighbors, smiled, returned the small kindnesses the day offered him. Still, the sentence from the paper followed him with every step. Some paths take longer because they're meant to carry more weight. What weight? And who, exactly, had been watching him carry it? That evening, Harry called again. Dad, you got a minute? Larry sat at the kitchen table, envelope now resting between his palms like a confession. I've got time, he said. There was a pause on the line. Mom said you went in today. Just a few hours. You didn't have to. Larry looked at the window, at his reflection layered over the dark yard beyond it. I know. Harry exhaled. You always say that. This time, Larry didn't respond right away. You ever feel, Harry continued carefully, Like you stayed somewhere longer than you should have because leaving felt like giving up? The question landed gently. That was what hurt. Larry closed his eyes. I stayed, he said slowly, because I believed faith wasn't about moving on. It was about standing still when standing still was hard. Silence. Then Harry said, softer, I wish you'd let yourself believe you mattered more than that place. Larry opened his eyes. So do I, he admitted. The words surprised him with their honesty. Later that night, long after Tina had gone to bed, Larry sat alone on the couch, Christmas lights blinking quietly in the corner. He unfolded the paper again, smoothing the crease with his thumb. For years, he had believed that humility meant invisibility, that doing good work quietly was its own reward. And maybe it was. But what if humility didn't require disappearing? What if faith wasn't just about waiting, but about being ready when the waiting ended? Larry felt a tightening in his chest. Not fear, recognition. The next morning, December 26th, his phone rang at 6:47 a.m. An unfamiliar number. Larry stared at it until the ringing stopped. Then, against his own instinct, he called back. Larry Scott. A woman's voice answered after the first ring. Calm. Professional. I was hoping you'd return my call. Larry stood, heart beating faster now. Yes, ma'am. This may sound unusual, she said, but we've been reviewing long-term staff records. Quiet ones. People who stayed. Larry swallowed. There's a position opening, she continued. Facilities supervisor. Part-time at first. Advisory, really. We need someone who knows the buildings and the people. Larry sank into the chair. I'm not. He stopped himself. Old reflex. Shrinking before the question was finished. The woman paused, then said, gently but firmly, we believe you are exactly what we're looking for. Larry looked down at the folded paper in his hand. For the first time, the years of quiet work, the early mornings, the unnoticed holidays began to rearrange themselves in his mind, not as evidence of being overlooked, but as preparation. I'll come in, Larry said. When he hung up, the house was still quiet. Tina slept. Lola breathed softly at his feet. Larry sat there, stunned, aware of one simple truth settling into place. Faith hadn't changed his life overnight. It had positioned him for the moment when life finally decided to answer back. And now that the answer had begun, Larry understood something else, too. Staying had never been the mistake. Believing he would never be seen had been. Larry arrived early. Of course he did. The campus looked different in daylight, fuller somehow, as if it had been holding its breath and finally decided to exhale. Larry parked in a visitor spot instead of his usual one and sat for a moment with his hands resting on the steering wheel, steadying himself. He wasn't here to clean today. That thought felt strange, almost disrespectful, like wearing the wrong clothes to church. Inside, the administrative office smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A woman stood as soon as she saw him, mid-50s, composed, eyes alert in the way of people who noticed details others missed. Mr. Scott, she said, extending her hand. I'm Evelyn Carter. Larry shook it carefully, firm, but not forceful. He'd learned that balance over a lifetime. They walked the halls together. Not behind him this time. Beside him, Evelyn asked questions that surprised him. Not about schedules or supplies, but about people. Who do you trust on night shifts? Who notices when something's off? Who shows up even when no one's watching? Larry answered slowly, thoughtfully. He named names that never made memos. He spoke about quiet workers, overlooked corners, small systems that held everything together without credit. Evelyn listened, really listened. You see the whole building, she said at one point. Not just the floors. Larry felt something loosen in his chest. The offer came without ceremony. Part-time supervisor, advisory role, training younger staff, slightly better pay, better hours, dignity written into the title even if no one ever said the word out loud. Larry nodded as she spoke, hands folded in his lap, resisting the urge to say thank you too quickly, as if gratitude might reveal desperation. When Evelyn finished, she waited. Well, she asked. Larry took a breath. I won't stop caring, he said carefully. I won't stop noticing the small things. Evelyn smiled. That's exactly why we asked. At home, Tina listened without interrupting as Larry told her everything. When he finished, she covered her mouth with her hand and laughed softly through tears she didn't bother hiding. I knew it, she said. Knew what? Larry asked. That one day, she said, reaching for his hand. All that staying would mean something. Larry squeezed her fingers. I didn't stay for this. I know, Tina said. That's why it counts. That evening, Larry walked Lola as the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the street. Neighbors waved. One stopped to chat. Ordinary moments, unchanged. And yet, Larry felt taller. Not prouder, just steadier. The years hadn't been erased. The strain hadn't vanished. His knees still ached. His hands still bore the marks of work. But now, those years stood behind him like witnesses instead of weights. As he turned back toward the house, Larry thought of the envelope, the sentence that had found him when he wasn't looking. Some paths take longer because they're meant to carry more weight. For the first time, he understood. The weight hadn't crushed him. It had shaped him. And tomorrow, when he walked those halls again, not as someone invisible, but as someone trusted, Larry knew he would carry that weight the same way he always had. Quietly, faithfully. Larry's first morning in the new role felt almost the same. The sun still rose slowly over Phoenix. The building still hummed with quiet before the day began. The floors were still clean, and yet everything was different. Larry unlocked the doors and paused, keys warm in his hand. He stood there longer than necessary, not out of habit this time, but out of awareness. For years, he had entered buildings like a guest who didn't want to be noticed. Now, he entered like someone entrusted. He didn't rush. He walked the halls the way he always had, observing, listening. He noticed a loose handrail and made a note. He stopped to speak with a young custodian whose eyes carried the familiar mix of pride and fatigue. He asked about her shift, about her life. She looked surprised, then relieved. At midday, Larry sat alone in a small office that wasn't really his yet. A desk, a chair, a name taped temporarily to the door. L. Scott. He smiled at that. Temporary things had never scared him. From his jacket pocket, he took out the folded paper, the sentence that had found him on Christmas morning. He read it once more, slowly, then placed it carefully in the drawer. Not as proof, as closure. That evening, Larry came home before sunset. Tina noticed immediately. You're early, she said. So are we, Larry replied. They ate dinner together, unhurried. Lola rested her head on Larry's knee, satisfied. Harry called later, and Larry told him about the day. Not the title, not the pay, but the people. They listen now, Larry said simply. Harry paused. They always should have. Larry smiled. Maybe, but I needed to be ready too. Later, as the house settled into quiet, Larry stood at the window, watching Christmas lights blink on across the neighborhood. He thought about the years he had doubted, the mornings he had shown up without promise, the faith he had carried without proof. None of it had been wasted. Not the silence, not the waiting, not the staying, because life hadn't rewarded him for being loud or clever or fast. It had rewarded him for being faithful. Larry turned off the light and joined Tina in bed, the night calm and complete. Tomorrow would come. Work would continue. Life would remain imperfect. But for the first time, Larry Scott rested with the certainty that something essential had been answered, not by chance, not by luck, but by a quiet life lived honestly, all the way through. And that, he understood now, was success. Not early, not flashy, but earned.